Hi everyone, welcome everyone. Wow, what a nice crowd for the beginning of the summer in the great heat, but I'm glad you all joined. Friends, we're going to be doing a series over the summer, the Monday nights that I'm here, which hopefully will be most of them, but not all of them. It's a series because there is, unlike my usual style of giving one-off classes that relate to a topic in the parasha or in life or stuff that's going on, this is going to be cumulative, and ideally you want to watch listen to every one of them, but I will recap each one. And I'm calling this the summer of Geula, the summer of redemption. That's what we're going to go with. That is the overarching theme that we're going to go through. And to do that, as I'll explain momentarily, presently, we're going to be using the book of Daniel. Daniel the prophet. Daniel the prophet. And we're going to zone in on one commentator, a number of them, but we're going to zone in on one of them, and that is the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel, who lived in Spain. He was an advisor to Ferdinand and Isabella, Yamach Shemam, and he was offered to stay in Spain, but did not want to have his people, his congregation. He was a rabbi as well as an accountant, obviously, for these people. And he left. Around this time, he wrote a commentary in the book of Daniel, as we're going to see. And it's called Ma'anei Yeshua, which basically means the well springs of redemption. Okay, so that's going to be the overarching theme. And we'll see why the book of Daniel is so important. And dare I say it, what's happening today, and when I say today, I literally mean today, is predicted, outlined, and understood by Daniel the prophet. Okay? And we're going to see why that is. It's a fascinating book. It's a difficult book to understand because most of it is not in Hebrew, it's in Aramaic. There's a switch from Hebrew, from Lashon Kodesh, where all the books of the prophets are written. Sometimes you get a word or a phrase in Aramaic. Here, it's the language of the Jewish people of his day. And when this book was written, they kept it in its original language of Aramaic, which is very strange. So it's hard to understand a lot of it, but the commentators come along and really open it up for us to understand. So why Daniel? Why is this person so important? So let's look at the history of him, who he was, what he got up to. We're going to go deep this summer. This is not light, fluffy stuff. Okay? But I promise you, you're going to understand what's happening in the world today. When I say the world, I'm going to divide the world into two parts, as does the Abarbanel. The Christian world and the Islamic world. Because both of those are spoken about and predicted for the end of days in the book of Daniel. And of course, the Jewish people's relationship to those two kingdoms that we're dealing with right now. Right now. Okay? Let's dive right in. We're talking about the destruction of the first temple. There was a dictator, a very world-famous dictator by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. And he started to gain power and control all over the Middle East. And he made it his goal to go into Israel and to destroy the temple of King Solomon that had stood for 400 years. It's a long time. 400 years the Beit HaMikdash had existed. He comes along and destroys it. Now, there are going to be people who come after him who do the same thing. The Greeks are going to do it. And the Romans, he, in a sense, wasn't so much about killing as many Jews as possible, but, as I like to call it, a brain drain. He knew that the Jewish people had great wisdom. This dictator knew that he didn't want to just kill these Jews, but use their knowledge and their power, and yes, their wealth, and their knowledge to make wealth in order to make good decisions. So he does the following. He kidnaps hundreds of young Jewish boys and schleps them out of Israel into Bavel. Babylonia, modern-day Iraq. And he treats them really, really well. He gives them the best food. He gives them the best accommodation. He gives them the best teachers for years. Actually, 3 years. Now, we don't know who most of these young boys were, and we're not told, as far as I know, how young they were. But they were very, very young. I think they were under bar mitzvah when he took them. But we do know who 4 of them were. And one of them was Daniel, who at this point is not a prophet, he's a young kid. And the other 3 are called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You may have heard those names before. They're still used today, as is the name Daniel in today's day and age. These 3, thank you so much. These 4 people are going to become the predictors for the end of days. Daniel the prophet is one of the few people in Jewish history who knew when Mashiach would come. Not only that, he also knew, this is how great and unbelievable he was, as I'm going to prove to you very clearly, he also knew what was going to happen that was going to lead up to the arrival of Mashiach. And all of that is written and hinted at in the book of Daniel. Okay, you're starting to see why his prophecy is so important. Now, I've got to mention, the book of Daniel is not in the books of prophets. You know, we have Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah is the 5 books of Moses. Nevi'im are the books of the prophets. And then you have Ketuvim, writings, that, for example, include the 5 Megillot, the 5 scrolls, Esther and Eicher and the others. Okay. The book of Daniel is put in writings. There is a machloket whether Daniel himself was a prophet or not a prophet. Some say he wasn't, and that's why this book is put in the book of writings, the chapter of writings, Ketuvim. But the Abarbanel, who we're going with, and if you come to later classes, I'll tell you my obsession and my fascination with this particular book of Abarbanel. He believes he was a prophet, but this book had to be put in the book of writings because the relevance of it goes beyond just prophecy. It goes into understanding many philosophical ideas within Judaism. With me so far? Let's just recap. I know I'm downloading a lot of information on you, but you can handle it. Nebuchadnezzar comes, destroys the first temple, knocks it down, exiles many people, grabs a whole bunch of young kids and says, I'm going to train you. I'm going to feed you the best food. I'm going to give you the best accommodation. You're going to eat what I eat. And I'm going to give you the best teachers that are known to man that I have in Babylonia, which was really the greatest country, nation of its day. And you're going to become my best advisors. 4 of them are pulled out and they are put inside the environs of Nebuchadnezzar. He changes Daniel's name to Belteshazzar. Not Belshazzar, that's somebody else, but Belteshazzar. Why? Because that's a name of his God. Small g. He saw in Daniel something that no one else could see, and he changed his name to the name of his God. It's like, I don't know, kidnapping a kid and saying, you're now Jesus. Sounds offensive, but in those days, offense wasn't really taken. This is a very powerful individual in the world, especially in Bavel, which we mentioned is the epicenter of all the world at this point, Babylonia. Okay. Takes to the palace, and they start to bring out the food, and they say, we're going to give you this for 3 years. You're going to have a 3-year training program. Daniel turns around and says, but I learned from my mother and father, who at this point may have been killed, we don't even know, that I can only eat kosher food. And the guy who's put in charge of Daniel and the other kids, these young boys, says, it's not the way it works. You say no to Nebuchadnezzar, you're dead. And therefore, you better eat this food. So Daniel thinks about it and says, if you want me to do my job well, I can only eat kosher food. That's the way it is. And he says, you know what, let's make a test. For the 10 days, let me eat only kosher food, which in those days pretty much was like pulses and grains. And that's what I'm going to eat. And after 10 days, if I look any less healthy than all the other Jewish boys who are getting all the amazing non-kosher but delicious food, meats and who knows what else they're being served, then I'll revert to it. He says, fine, you got yourself a deal. 10 days, Daniel, and he manages to persuade his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, do the same as him. After 10 days, this guy, his name is Arioch, looks at them and says, wow, you got it. You look fantastic. You've kept your health. You kept your strength. You can eat whatever you want for these 3 years. The rabbis say this decision was really important, and Daniel would not have been successful for sure had he eaten non-kosher food, because non-kosher food, the rabbis tell us, is metamtem et halev. It dulls the heart of wisdom. We don't really know the reason for kosher, I'll be honest with you. It's a chok, it's a statute. But we know in some way it affects the amount of wisdom and the amount of right judgment that a person has. We know, for example, that all kosher foods, the rabbis tell us, impact the neshama, not the body. Not the body, the neshama, the soul. And therefore you eat. You know, people say you are what you eat. You are what you eat because I eat chicken and I'm not a chicken. I eat beef and I'm not a cow. But what you eat impacts who you are. That's for sure. So Daniel knew that he was going to be successful. He had a feeling. And even Nebuchadnezzar had a feeling, that's why he gave him this name of Belteshazzar, that you're going to be a really important person. He goes, I don't know how, you're still a kid, but learn well, do what you need to do, and we're going to come for advice later on. Okay. So there he is, and he does this 3 years of training. And then something really, really big and important happens that's not only going to impact Nebuchadnezzar, not only going to impact Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, it's going to impact the Jewish people for the rest of history. That's a big statement. But listen to what happens. Nebuchadnezzar goes to sleep and he has a dream. A chalom. And this dream freaks him out. Absolutely freaks him out. And he knows that this dream is really important. Now, that's a good question, because some people don't dream, or they do but always forget their dreams, like my wife. And some people dream all the time, and they remember the dreams, like me. And I have a book of dreams, actually one of the good ones, Rabbi Al-Maleh's book, right next to my bed. As soon as I wake up, I check the book. I've become, over the years, I get more questions on dreams than anything else, I think. You know what I'm saying? Most people don't call me up saying, Rabbi, how to become a better person? Where should I give my tzedakah? No. They call me up with, I had a dream about teeth falling out, I was flying, my grandmother, whatever. Okay? This is a very big topic. And as one of my rabbis told me, whenever an Ashkenazi says to you, I had a dream, I'm like, okay, I'll listen. But if a Sephardi tells you I had a dream, you better listen. And if a Sephardi woman comes to you and says, I had a dream, you better listen really hard. I'm being serious. Interestingly, last week, I had a dream that I need to buy this book and study it, which I'd never done in full length before. Okay? More about that another time. I have a lot to say on that, but that's another discussion, not for now. I'm actually being very, very serious. Okay. So, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And he wakes up from this dream, and the expression that's used, which we know from the days of Pharaoh and Joseph, right, whose name is changed to Tzafat Panech, which is not a Hebrew name, but it means the dream interpreter, that when great people have dreams and they're disturbed by them, they want an interpretation. They really, really want an interpretation to their dream. And so, Nebuchadnezzar gathers together a whole bunch of people, advisors, to help him understand what this dream actually means. And he doesn't just gather, his close advisors. He gathers together astrologers, philosophers, demon speakers. That's actually what they are. People have the ability machashafim, it says, who are able to talk to demons, demonic beings, who, by the way, the Abarbanel says, look like people, have tremendous powers, and roam this earth. I'm going to make an aside. I'm not going to go into it, but I have to mention it because it came into my head when I was reading this piece of Abarbanel. If aliens are real, if, that's a big if, but if they are, I don't believe they are beings from other planets, because you don't travel for billions and trillions of miles, crash land on Earth, and you know what I'm saying. It could be beings from different dimensions, and according to the understanding of Barbalal and others, it could well be other spiritual beings from other dimensions, possibly demons. I'm going to lay it out there. I'm going to put that as an aside. I have a lot more to say on that, but I can't go deep into that right now. That'll be another discussion for another time. Anyway, so he gathers all these people together, and among them are a group. Now, this group have been a thorn in our sides for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they are called the Custim. Custim. The Chaldeans is how they're called in English. These people are experts in astronomy and astrology. So he gathers all these people together and he says, I had a dream. Not that kind of dream, but a real dream. And I need to know its interpretation. The Custim, the Chaldeans, who hate Jews, I have to mention it as an aside, so you don't have any sympathy upon them whatsoever, jump forward and they say, don't worry, sir, Nebuchadnezzar, great mental dictator, we will interpret this dream for you. And he turns around and says, okay, give me the interpretation to this dream. And they're like, well, tell us what the dream was. And he says, no, you have to tell me the dream I had and the interpretation. Whoa. Now, this isn't good, because interpreting a dream is one thing, but telling someone else what their dream is and giving the correct interpretation is a big deal. Now, they start to think among themselves, and they're like, why is he not telling us the dream? It must be that he's nervous that if we interpret the dream in a bad way, it's going to impact him badly. What's this based upon? It's actually based upon a very famous teaching in the Gemara, or the Gemara speaks about it, that the interpretation you give a dream actually becomes its manifestation. Chalom holech achar pitrona. A dream follows the interpretation. The way you interpret a dream impacts what its meaning becomes. Actually, the word for a dream in Hebrew is a chalom, which is a dream. But it's related to another word, which is a chalon. What's a chalon? A window. Because it's a window into who you are and into window to what could be. So you've got to make sure that if you do get your dream interpreted, you go to a person who knows their stuff. And there's actually a story about a guy called Bar Hadaya in the Gemara in Berachot, who interprets dreams and will give you a favorable interpretation if you pay him. And if you don't pay him, he gave a bad interpretation, and it always followed exactly what he said. And it was a big problem for the people he was interpreting for. The guy he was interpreting for, I think it was Rabbah, ends up losing his wife, his kids, his money. It's a terrible life because this guy Bar Hadaya kept giving him bad interpretations. So they thought, these Custim, these Chaldeans, they thought, well, he's just nervous that we're going to give a bad interpretation to his really scary dream, and he's going to be very upset with us and kill us. So they said to him, don't worry, we're going to give you a good interpretation and tell it to us privately so that no one's going to know and no one's going to be involved in this, and we'll give you the interpretation. Why were they so keen? Why are they so keen to interpret his dream? Well, if you save the king anguish, what does the king usually do? Give you money and power. And that's true today, right? You want to be a close advisor. As the Hebrew expression goes, Eved Melech Melech. The servant, the close servant of a king, is a king. So you may not be able to get the king's ear, but if you get one of his close advisors, you've really got the king's ear, right? So you may not get to meet Putin, but you meet his, close advisors, you're kind of getting into Putin as well. So they thought that. However, they were wrong. That's not why he didn't want to give them the dream itself. Why did he not give them the dream itself? Because he'd forgotten it. You wake up in the morning and you've had a dream, and let's say it's a nightmare, and you get anguish over it, and as the day progresses, you forget it, but there was a bad dream. You had a nightmare. You experience I'm talking about, people? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You're like, I had it really bad. What was it? I don't really remember it so much. That's what happened. The dream had escaped him. He knew it was bad. He knew it was meaningful. And so he says to them, no. Give me the dream. And they fight back. No, just tell us the dream. We'll interpret it. Backwards and forwards. And he says, if you don't give me the dream and interpretation, I'm going to cut you up into bits, scatter your flesh, if you don't give me the dream. But if you do give me the dream and you give me a good interpretation, I'm going to make you richer beyond your wildest dreams. They turn around and they say that we can't do it. Who are we? Like Acharon? And the rabbis say that what they were saying was, since the destruction of the temple, the ability to have prophecy, the ability to do such a thing that you're telling us to do, no one can do. No one. Forget about it. Because Aharon HaKohen, he's gone. The Kohen Gadol, you got rid of it. You banished the whole thing. And the Kohen Gadol used to have a breastplate, a Choshen Mishpat. And inside was the Urim V'Tumim. This is from the Torah. That's God's name. And the stones on the Choshen, there were 12 stones, would light up with various letters. And that would give you an interpretation. You're asking us to do something that may have been able to be done, but not anymore, because you destroyed the temple. So he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I destroyed the temple. I've defeated myself. The rabbis tell us that if the non-Jewish leaders of this world knew how bad it was, hurting Jews in Israel, kicking Jews out of Israel, destroying them, if they knew how bad it was, not just for us, but for them as well, they would leave us alone. They would give us all the money in the entire world. If they knew what they had done by destroying the Beit HaMikdash. It's not just us that it affects, the entire world that's affected negatively by hurting Jews. They still haven't learned that lesson, so we'll leave that lesson aside. By the way, if that's the only lesson of tonight, dayenu. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I have a lot of non-Jews who watch my videos too. Anyway, mostly non-Jews actually. Anyway, so now Daniel, and they're obsessed with Daniel the prophet. So Daniel is not involved in this whole thing. Kills the Kasdim, kills the Chaldeans. He's upset because he killed Jews and kicked them out of Israel. So he's paying the price for his own stupid, short-sighted actions. Okay. He's like, that's it. I'm going to kill all of you. Anyone who's an advisor in any way, shape, or form, including all the Jewish kids I brought out, including all the necromancers and all the astrologers, I'm going to kill you all. He's that angry. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to, really annoy a dictator. Daniel hears about this. He's not there at this point. And he's like, this is not good. I'm going to be killed. My 3 best friends are going to be killed. And all the Jewish kids are going to be killed. And everyone else. So he turns around to Arioch and says, get me a meeting with Nebuchadnezzar. And I was like, it doesn't work like that. There's an iron wall around him. Like Achashverosh, who's not alive yet, he's coming after this. Although Daniel's going to be an advisor at that time as well. He's going to live throughout this entire period. He says, there's an iron wall around him, just like Achashverosh had one, and Paro, and the president of the United States, or North Korea loved it. It's the way it is. You can't just walk in. He's like, trust me, he's going to want to speak to me. Give me a chance to save my life and the life of my people. And Arioch likes him, remembers that his name is Belteshazzar, which is the name of a god, small g. and says, fine, I'll hook you up. So Daniel gets an audience with Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? And remember, he's not just giving advice, he's fighting for his life, because there is now a death warrant on his head. And he says, great king, I want to figure out what this dream is and give this interpretation. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar just wanted the interpretation, but he'd forgotten what the dream is. But that's really what he wanted. He wanted to know what was going on. If there was a threat against his kingdom, right, against his family, against his legacy. So he's freaking out. So he says to Daniel, fine. But he says, I need time. Give me time. Because how do you need? A few days. Daniel secludes himself and he prays for 3 days straight, maybe more. Prays to God to help him, to save him, in order to survive this crazy and challenging ordeal. Then he's called up in front of Nebuchadnezzar, and there's an audience of people, including all these people who are going to be killed if he doesn't get it right, because he's the only person who's got the courage, right, to try to do this. And he says to him, I know what you dreamt, and I have your interpretation. And he says, did you have a dream? It's like a magic trick, but it's not. This is prophecy. Some say it's Ruach HaKodesh, but the Abal Banel says it's absolute nevuah, right? After praying to God, he says, I don't have the answer for you, but I come from a tradition of God giving us prophecy. And just like our ancestor Yosef was able to interpret dreams from Pharaoh, God has given me the ability. The first thing he does, he ascribes all power and all success to God. That's a very important feature of the story, because had he not, it wouldn't have ended well for anybody. Okay. And he says, this is the dream you saw, and this is the dream. You saw a massive statue in your dream, and the statue was divided up into parts and metals. Parts and metals. Now he's got Nebuchadnezzar's attention because he was right. And in this dream, you saw a statue with a head made of gold. And in the dream, you saw its chest and arms were made of silver, kesef. And you saw that its legs, upper legs, yerach, which is the knee up, were made of, its belly was made of nechoshet, of copper, and its legs were made of steel. Okay, so we have gold, silver, copper, and steel legs. And the feet I believe are referred to as the shok, which is the knee down, including the feet and the toes, was steel, and mixed in with the steel was cheres, clay, ceramic, mixed in. That was your dream. And he says, so far so good. But then what happened to the statue? And he goes, you saw yourself, someone pick up a stone, a big rock, and throw the rock at the feet, and the rock smashed the ceramic, the clay in the feet. Is that what you saw? He says, fantastic. Phase 1. That was the dream I had. It came back to me. Now, Daniel, what does it mean? So he says, and this is why it's very important and pertinent. And over the coming weeks, we're going to look at 2 other dreams that he had and their interpretations. Okay. He says the head is gold, and that's you. You are the gold. You are Babylon. Babylon was the head. It really was a brilliant society. They were geniuses. The head always represents the power of thought. Okay, the moch, the brain inside the head. And you represent gold. So far, so good. But your kingdom is not going to last forever. The Babylonian kingdom is going to leave. And it's going to be overtaken by another kingdom, represented by the silver of the chest and the arms. And that is the Persian and the Medians, the whole Achashverosh Purim story, they're going to come after you. That's going to be the second kingdom, and they're going to follow on from you. And that's exactly what happened, by the way. After Nebuchadnezzar dies, Achashverosh takes over and reestablishes the Babylonian kingdom in Paras, in Persia. Right? That's the whole Purim story. And he goes, but they're not going to last either. Because another kingdom is going to come after them. And that is going to be the Greeks. And they're like copper. Why the Greeks are like copper, we'll leave aside. There's a certain strength, there's a pliability. And that was the belly. Right? The Greeks were into the physical, and they represent the belly. And then after them, and that's the whole Greek, that's the whole Hanukkah story. Yeah? That's the Greek that starts with Alexander the Great. He took over from and they're going to come, the Persians and Nebuchadnezzar. And after them is going to come the fourth and final, although not so final as we'll see in a moment, kingdom. And that's going to be the Romans. And the Romans are like iron, right? They're tough, steel. And they're not going to be messed with. And they're going to last a long, long time. And I guess that they represent the legs, because the legs are what help you move around. And the Romans really conquer the entire world. So what's with the feet? What's with the feet? He saw, if you remember, he saw steel, iron, and he saw ceramic, clay. Now, those two, as far as I know, don't usually mix together, right? But they seem in his dream to be held together. And he said the following. He said, at the end of days, Acharit Yamim, right before Mashiach comes, there's going to be a mixing together of two kingdoms. The kingdom of Rome, Edom, who pretty much everyone agrees is the Christian Western world, right? That's the continuation of Rome. Actually, to this day, Rome, right, still represents, the whole Christian world, and the Muslim world. And there's going to be a mixing up of those two kingdoms. Now, really, it was a little bit of clay, because it's not really a kingdom in and of itself, the Islamic world, but it is powerful and it is present. And they're mixed up, but they don't really mix up very well. So they kind of like, it's not like a soup, right? Or a melting pot. It's like a tossed salad. You know what I'm saying? That's how, my sociology professor used to put it. Sometimes they kind of like mix together, but they're not completely immersed together. And they stay separate, but they're living among each other. But there's going to be a stone. And this stone is going to come, and it's going to smash this clay and break it. And at that point, the Jewish people are going to rise up with Mashiach and save the entire world from all future wars. And the Jewish people, after thousands of years of being in exile, are going to finally come on top, and there's going to be peace throughout the entire world, and everything's going to be great. That's the interpretation he gave to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar loves this interpretation. He got the dream right. He makes Daniel, he tries to worship Daniel. Literally to bow down, to make him into Elokut, it says. To make him into a god. Right? They loved gods in those days. And Daniel says, I'm telling you, don't do that. It's not me, it's Hashem. There's only one true God. Nebuchadnezzar starts to come around. Starts to regret what he did to the Jewish people, which happens a lot, after the fact, unfortunately. And starts to give him a lot of money and power, just like Yosef at the time of the Egyptian exile that we went through. Okay. This stone, I want to talk about the stone, and we're going to finish with this because I don't want to do more than 35, 40 minutes, but I'm going to pick up on this a little bit later. This stone says the Abarbanel appeared before. Where did it appear before? In history. Someone took a stone after a certain event and made a mizbeach, an altar, out of this stone. So it actually existed. Nebuchadnezzar saw a vision of a stone, and he saw it smack. But there was a stone somewhere in history. And where was that? Yaakov, Jacob. So we're going to have to fold Jacob into the story because he's a very important part of Jewish history from its beginning right through to its end. Why Yaakov? Why Jacob more than his father Yitzchak or Abraham? Why was he privy to information that is relevant to the end of days more than his father or grandfather? And the answer is because Yaakov is going to represent Galut, exile. Listen carefully, this is very, very important. Okay? Because we're going to revisit Yaakov again and again and again. Now, the word Yaakov actually means Akev, heel, heel. How did he get that name? Anybody remember? So, right, he held on to his brother Esav's heel as they were coming out of the womb. What a strange story. Why do I care he's holding on to his heel? And why would he get the name heel? Why would he call him that? Why is that important? Right? Had he been coming out holding his ear, he would have been called Mr. Ozen. I don't even get it. Right? It makes no sense. So the answer is because this is all about the end of days. At the end of days, Esav are going to leave, and Yaakov is going to be successful on the heels of, it works in English, on the heels of Esav. Esav, which we said represents the fourth exile, they're going to go down. Esav is eventually going to be humbled, and then Mashiach is going to come, and Yaakov's going to run to represent that. Why Yaakov? Why is he Mr. Redemption, Mr. Exile and Redemption? Because he was the one who all his kids become the future of the Jewish people. Avraham had a Yishmael. Yitzchak had a Esav. So only Yaakov is going to represent the entire Jewish, because all of his kids came out great. Now watch carefully. This is very important. Yaakov, if you remember, has to run away from Israel, and Esav chases him out. Sound familiar? It's going to happen again and again and again. He leaves, and he goes and lives with his uncle. Who knows that Torah? Lavan. Is Lavan a good guy? No. Does he have a difficult time living with Lavan? Yes. Extremely difficult time. But is he successful? Very much so. He marries his wives. He has all of his kids. He becomes extremely wealthy at the expense of Lavan. And after leaving Israel poor and broken and shattered, running away from Esav, he returns with great success, with money, with wealth and respect. We, his descendants, were kicked out of Israel, went into Galut 4 times. We become successful outside, and then we are going to return like Yaakov returned to Israel. It's a portent of the future. We're going to return, we are returning, Baruch Hashem, with our great success to the land of Israel. So we're following Yaakov's pattern. Yaakov represents Galut, exile, and Geula, redemption. But he has a dream. And in that dream, he sees a ladder. And on this ladder, he sees angels, Olim v'Yorim, going up and going down. Remember that whole story? He sees 4 angels. And these 4 angels represent, that's right, the 4 exiles of Jewish history. Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar, Mr. Gold. Persia, Paras, silver. Copper, which is the Greeks. And steel, which is the Romans. Right. And he sees it. Do you remember how he slept that night? He slept on a rock. Remember that whole thing? There were 12 rocks, and he formed them into one. And then he took that rock, and he made it into an altar, a mizbeach for the future. 12 rocks, unified, sleeps on it, and he puts rocks around him, takes that rock, and makes a mizbeach out of it. That's the rock that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. But what did it destroy? What did that rock destroy in Nebuchadnezzar's dream? The clay, the ceramic, and it smashed it. Didn't smash the head, didn't smash the body, didn't smash the stomach or the legs. It smashed the... Say the rabbis, at the end of days, there's going to be a 5th exile, very short, very painful and difficult, and it's going to be mixed in. It's going to be mixed in. Some say the exile's not going to only involve the Jews. The Abarbanel says the final war of Gog and Magog, that is the feat that Nebuchadnezzar dreamt about, that Daniel interpreted, that hit the dog, that killed the cat, right? That final was actually the war of Gog and Magog. That's going to be the war of the Christian world against the Islamic world, with the Jewish people featuring in Israel, around Jerusalem, which we're seeing today. That's going to be the final battle. Interestingly, the prophet Ezekiel tells us a number of nations involved, and the major one is Paras, that we know about. Paras, which is modern-day Iran, which is going to be the entire Islamic world. It's going to come against the Jewish people. That, my friends, is the first dream of Daniel, that Daniel interpreted, that Nebuchadnezzar had. Next, well, maybe not next week, I won't be here next week, but next session will be in 2 weeks. We're going to look at 2 more dreams that Nebuchadnezzar had, that Daniel interpreted, which will give us even more specific details about the 4 exiles and then the 5th and final exile that we are in today, right before Mashiach comes. We shall stop over there. We did a lot tonight. Thank you all very, very much. Any questions on anything we discussed this evening? Yeah.
This is the 5th one?
We are in the, I'm going to show you over the coming weeks that I'm here. We are in the 5th. It's like a little bit of the 4th, because a little bit of iron, and it's the 5th one as well. It's a mixture. We are going from 4th to 5th, but really we're in this final 5th one. The final 5th one that's going to come and redeem us. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a much more difficult question, but if you could just answer short.
Yeah.
You have to go into detail. You said you're studying, you're giving the opinion of the now, right?
Yeah.
Do most Mepharshim follow this?
Nope.
interpretation?
Nope. He's not radical, right? They bring him down. The Malbim has a lot to say on this. I've written many more for the Radak. You got Rashi. The Abarbanel, however, is considered extremely great, and anyone who talks about Daniel and talks about Mashiach's arrival, right, and the end of days of war, you have to quote the Abarbanel. His books on the redemption are, so whenever you see books with a mixture of commentaries, they're always going to throw in words of the Abarbanel. Yeah, and it's a very simple book. He writes very simple Hebrew. It's like for everyone. It's not some deep academic text, and he brings proofs to everything that he says. Who?
Are you familiar with Radak's interpretation?
Yeah, it's here, yeah. They bring it down.
Is it very far out?
It's, no. The Abarbanel does a more of a Kabbalistic understanding. He kind of falls into that. Yeah, I would say he moves more to that realm. He's going to speak later on about reincarnation and Mashiach being a reincarnation of King David. He's going to throw more of that in, unlike others. But he does many times. The other Kabbalists, Rabbeinu Bechaya, and others will align with the Abarbanel's interpretation. It's not out there. It's a very mainstream, respected interpretation of the book of Daniel. Yeah.
There is another question.
Yeah.
Why does Nebuchadnezzar merited with these dreams and prophecies?
That's a very, very good. The question is, why was Nebuchadnezzar merited? A very, very good question. I'm not sure, but I will say the following. When you have great leaders of tremendous power, we give them special prominence. I know even terrible, there's brachot you say when you meet a king or a dictator, even bad ones, right? There's a certain power, and Hashem leads them and guides them. They become tools of Hashem to reveal Himself in this world. Just like Paro, right? Hashem hardened his heart in order to have the plagues finish off and the redemption and the big Kiddush Hashem. So Hashem uses. So really, the interpretation of the rabbis is that great leaders don't even have free will of their own. They're just pawns. That's why God is called King of Kings. Melech Malchem Lachim. He just uses them in order to make big stuff happen in this world. So was there something unique about him? He was just a tremendously powerful individual, obviously very brilliant, and God used him as a pawn in his hands. And again, all these dreams that he had were actually relevant about the future of Jewish and if not world history. Yeah.
I was wondering, Nebuchadnezzar's exile in the following portion, shouldn't that be one? I mean, we weren't redeemed after.
Very good. So you're right, but however, it goes by Malchut, meaning the question is, don't we go from one, doesn't it flow one to the other? And the answer is no. Because when Ahasuerus took over, the Medians, then the Persian Empire became its own powerful empire, took all the stuff of Nebuchadnezzar, ruled the Jewish people, prevented them from going back to Israel, and actually at some point they did. Darius said you could go back, and Ahasuerus prevented it, so it became its own kingdom. It goes by kingdoms. It goes by kingdoms, of which Persia, to this day, talk about the Egyptian kingdom, right? Speak about the Babylonian, you speak of the Persian, right? He controlled a large part of the world. Okay, we'll pick this up in a couple of weeks, Miss Hashem. Have a great night. Thanks, everyone.